How often do you watch a movie as a kid, only to watch it again as an adult and just be completely let down? That's exactly what happened to me when I watched Suburban Commando. Suburban Commando was released in 1991. It stars wrestling superstar Hulk Hogan as Shep Ramsey, a galactic superhero who ends up living with a very normal family. It's the typical odd couple trope where you have an eccentric person being paired with a very boring person. It was especially popular in the 80s and the 90s, and is pretty much the premise of any Chris Farley flick. The movie opens with a battle in outer space, and I swear to you, this movie shamelessly uses footage directly from the cutting room floor of Star Wars. Our hero, Ramsey, single-handedly takes out the entire crew on board the ship and confronts an evil man, Suitor, who will stop at nothing to take over the galaxy. Well, Ramsey ends up putting a stop to Suitor's plans by blowing up his entire ship. After the battle, Ramsey has to make a pit stop on a nearby planet in order to recharge his ship. Well, the nearest planet turns out to be Earth, and the safest place Ramsey can find to hide is inside this old warehouse. He flicks the switch and it turns out that the warehouse is actually an old abandoned disco club. Funk music starts playing with disco lights, and the shot was clearly made to make disco look dated, which is especially funny to see today in a movie that has not aged well itself. So Ramsey explores the area, and he comes across this lady hitting a vending machine. She's trying to get her quarters back, so Ramsey hits the machine and it spills quarters onto the ground. Remind you of anything? By the way, I looked into this. Terminator 2 came out in July of 1991. Suburban Commando came out in October of 1991. That means the director had 3 months to see Terminator 2 and then put it into his own movie. Kudos to him for working so fast. So at this point we finally get to meet our ordinary family. This is Charles. He likes to spend time in his workshop crafting things. No, not him. Him. Now, Charles is in a bit of a financial pinch and he needs to ask his boss for a raise, but he can't do it. He just doesn't have any courage. He is such a coward, in fact. On his way to work, every day he catches the same yellow light, and he never has the nerve to actually run it. Instead, he skids to a stop and everybody else just drives by him. When he finally gets to work, he goes right to his boss's office to ask for a raise, but of course he doesn't. Instead, the boss just shows him his prized possessions, simian crystals that he keeps behind this case. Well, instead of asking for a raise, the family just decides to rent out a small unit they have in their backyard to make some extra money. And guess who ends up renting the place? Charles ends up becoming suspicious of Ramsey. He goes through his things and finds his stash of guns. He also turns on this little device here. This device actually sends off a signal, which Suitor and the evil empire detect. And now that they know where Ramsey is hiding, they send the bounty hunters. And look at this picture. This is supposed to be some advanced civilization with intergalactic traveling capabilities, and this is their wanted poster. So now we have the setup for the plot. Ramsey's got to go before these bounty hunters find him, but the movie slows this down with a long montage. And I mean long. We go from scene to scene showing Ramsey doing stupid things just to prove he's from outer space. He thinks the mailman is trying to attack him by throwing papers into the house, so he pulls a knife on him and attacks him. He goes to an arcade where he thinks the games the kids are playing are actually real. He even takes over the controls of one of the games in order to fly a ship. He comes across a mime who's acting like he's behind a wall, but Ramsey of course thinks this is a force field, so he punches the mime in the face trying to break the force field. This old lady is looking for melons, and she tells him if you squeeze the melons, the softer ones are the better ones. So Ramsey of course squeezes it until it explodes. It goes all over the woman's face. He ends up coming across the same mime. This time he's trying to go up an imaginary ladder. Ramsey of course thinks this is real, so he throws him up to get him where he's going. We also have a few obligatory shots of Hulk Hogan lifting heavy things. At one point he even flips over a car. I told you, this montage sequence is so long, it just goes on, and I think it was even supposed to be longer. There's a shot at the end of the movie where he walks up to an ice cream truck, but the ice cream truck driver freaks out and drives away as if something happened before. Like the director intended something to be in this scene, but the editors left it out by mistake. Anyway, after this incredibly long sequence, Ramsey finally goes back to his spaceship to check on it. Charles, though, still being suspicious, follows him. Charles snoops around in his spaceship until he finds his body armor. He puts on the suit and suddenly wants to become a crime fighter, so he starts patrolling the streets until he comes across this woman being attacked by 2 men. When he saves the woman embraces him in a way that I think I've seen in another movie. You know what? They say imitation is the best form of flattery, but at this point I think it's just getting lazy. Star Wars, Terminator, RoboCop. At this point I don't think there's anything else this movie can rip off. So it turns out that while he was saving the woman, he accidentally left behind something. So the two of them need to use a tracking device in order to track it down. They use the PKE meter from Ghostbusters. Oh my god. They track down the device to a couple of thugs who had stolen it. They beat them up and get the device back. But after the bounty hunters also track down the device. Now the bounty hunters know pretty much exactly where Ramsey is. Back at the warehouse, Ramsey starts up the ship to leave, but it overheats and breaks down. He explains to Charles that the only way to fix it is with simian crystals. So that's why the movie told us his boss has simian crystals. So the two of them sneak back into the office in order to steal the crystals, and when they do is when the bounty hunters finally track them down. We get some pretty fun action, including Hulk Hogan throwing this guy through a wall, but it doesn't last long and we're eventually back at the warehouse. Now that he finally has the crystals, he's ready to go, but when he gets ready to leave, it turns out Suitor was tracking him down as well. Suitor shows us his true form. What the Oh my god. Ramsey electrocutes the creature from the Black Lagoon, and with nothing else in his way, he's finally ready to go. We have a farewell scene which shows us that they were somehow able to get a helicopter pad. The two men part ways, Charles a little braver now. In fact, by the end, he is so brave that instead of stopping at the yellow light, he blows it up. But did we really need this movie to tell us that story? The story of some person having another annoying, strange person thrust onto them to make their lives miserable, only for them to become better by the end? No, this trope has been done so many times. And better. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Elf, Uncle Buck, Harry and the Hendersons, Turner and Hooch, hell, Short Circuit. And that's just what I can think of off the top of my head. Go watch those ones instead. This movie has horrendous acting, even for a kid's movie. The effects are awful, and the writers got so caught up on writing for Hulk Hogan, they forgot to write a script for the movie. I love slapstick and funny, but this movie just took it too far. Like I said, I watched it as a kid and I liked it. If you watched it as a kid and you liked it, I suggest you keep it that way. Don't go back and revisit this one. So what do you think? Am I being too mean to a kid's movie? Does it deserve more credit than I'm giving it? Leave your comments down below and let's keep this conversation going. I'm Kenny, and until next time, keep watching movies.